For analysis on the results, I'm joined by Dan Shearer, editor of the Green Valley News, Jim Nintzel, executive editor of Tucson Local Media, and Sarah Garrecht Gassen, editorial page editor at the Arizona Daily Star. My thanks to all three of you for being here. Let's begin with day after the election, the Senate race in Arizona still too close to call. Jim, you want to start this one?
Yeah, this is a really fascinating race when you look at where Martha McSally was strongest. It was in the rural counties. Kyrsten Sinema, the Democrat, is winning Pima County. She's winning Maricopa County. Normally, that's what you do to win a race in Arizona, and yet Martha McSally has encircled her with these votes in the outlying counties. However, there are somewhere in the neighborhood of 500,000 votes left to count. Most of those are in Pima and Maricopa County. There's about 16,000 votes that separate these two as we speak, and I don't want to ruin the magic of television for the viewers out there, but we're taping this on Wednesday and it's airing on Friday. So I would just point out that Kyrsten Sinema is definitely still in this as of this moment.
But we should point out, too, that Maricopa County is a place that really didn't know Martha McSally. She built her career, launched her career in southern Arizona. She went up there, and while she is trailing in Maricopa County right now, she's done really well there, given that she had the name recognition struggle.
But Sarah, this is first female combat pilot. The country knew this woman.
Right. I don't think that she suffers from any sort of lack of name recognition statewide. I mean, I think she's had a national profile. She built that national profile very carefully, a frequent contributor on cable news. I mean, I've read articles about her and her accomplishments in women's magazines. She was not an unknown quantity. I think the difference is that she moved to the right vocally, outwardly, embraced President Trump. I think that helped Kyrsten Sinema to some degree to provide a clear-cut option against, if you don't like Trump, even though Kyrsten Sinema has voted with the Trump agenda more often than many Democrats are comfortable with, probably. It was a very clear choice. And so I think it's going to be very interesting to see which version of Arizona, which view of Arizona ultimately takes hold.
One of the things we've talked about in our circles, the lack of availability for some of these candidates. Why the sudden change for a lot of these candidates this time around? I mean, people like we said, Leah Marquez Peterson, who we know lost in her district, but we used to see her as a person representing the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, and that changed.
I think a lot of them are believing 25-year-old campaign aides who say you can do everything on social media, and I think that's a big problem. I think that they don't understand that there are lots of ways to reach people, and you need to hit all of them, and that the media on print media in very local areas is important, and it always will be important. We reach people she wants to reach, and it was very frustrating this campaign season. I've never seen it on both sides. The candidates ducking us is really what it amounted to, and that was really too bad.
I mean, they have it all planned out in their media strategy, and anything that deviates from that or pushes them to get off the messaging and the pat answers is something they don't want anything to do with. Although I will say, in fairness, Leah Marquez Peterson came and spoke with us at the editorial board. The only candidate who didn't come was that we had invited was Martha McSally, and so that kind of speaks for itself.
But we did speak to Martha McSally, and we couldn't get Kyrsten Sinema to talk to us. So again, it was, and I will tell you this, that they told us that every 15 minutes of their day is scheduled. I get it, you're busy. But when you talk to me, when you talk to Sarah, you're talking to thousands and thousands of people. Give us some time.
I think a lot of it has to do with the diminishing influence of the media in these elections, however. I think the television ads, the amount of money they're raising for television ads, what was there, $40 million spent in the Senate race, even by outside groups, and that's not even counting what the candidates spent, is drowning out the media. And the way a media story gets attention at this point is it's amplified somehow by campaign ads. So I think there's definitely, the media is not what it used to be.
Let's talk about this blue wave. Is that what happened in the 2nd Congressional District with the election of Ann Kirkpatrick?
I absolutely think so. I think Leah Marquez Peterson was going up against serious headwinds in this race because of the fact that Trump is unpopular in the suburbs, as we saw across the country, and women in particular, I think, were a big factor in this election, and they were not happy with Donald Trump. I mean, this is one of the most competitive districts in the country. It's split 1/3 Democrat, 1/3 Independent, 1/3 Republican. It has been very close in many elections. Martha McSally had a blowout 2 years ago. But other than that, this has been a tight district, and yet Leah Marquez Peterson lost it by 10 points, which we all saw coming.
I would disagree that there was a blue wave. If there was, we would be saying that Kyrsten Sinema is our new senator today, and we're not saying that. We don't know yet. So this seat has gone back and forth, and so we'll see what the future brings. But I'm not seeing a wave. I'm not really even seeing a ripple, I don't think.
I was surprised at how closed off Leah Marquez Peterson was in interviews, because we've known her for a very long time. And so seeing how a campaign manages someone who's well known, has good community experience, and kind of just shut all that down and tried to package her as something kind of different, which we saw in the forums when she answered about the climate change question, when she dodged that. I think that is something that is a lesson for future candidates, that don't get managed out of being yourself.
First Congressional District, third Congressional District. Can anyone ever unseat Tom O'Halloran and Raul Grijalva?
Raul Grijalva probably not. He's probably going to be in there until he wants to go. And the real question on him would be, are we going to let him choose his successor, in essence? But I think that the Republicans have thrown quite a few people at him. The only one who came remotely close was during the Tea Party movement of 2010, Ruth McClung, and she came real close. And other than that, no scares really for this guy. He knows he's in.
On O'Halloran, yes, that's a very competitive district as well, but the Republicans have thrown terrible candidates with Paul Babiou 2 years ago with the scandals that haunted him, and then with Wendy Rogers, who alienated a lot of Republicans in her primary race, and then just ran a campaign of hysteria, honestly, and the crazy things she was saying throughout this campaign were just not going to win over independent voters.
Let's move on to the governor's race. The polling told us that Governor Doug Ducey was going to keep his spot. David Garcia have the firepower he needed to actually give him a competitive race?
David Garcia is a good candidate on the education issue. He ran for state school superintendent a few years ago. A very interesting interview. I learned a lot, and it's his passion, but I think he came off as a one-issue candidate. Plus, the fact is he was running in Arizona, and for a Democrat to be successful on that level in Arizona is very difficult, particularly for governor.
It's fascinating to see the contrast between Kyrsten Sinema, who played to the center, and David Garcia, who played to the left in this race, especially since Kyrsten Sinema's background was on the left and David Garcia's background was in the center. So they kind of crossed paths in a way, and crossing streams is always troublesome, as we learned in Ghostbusters. But I would go so far as to say David Garcia, it's not an exact matchup because of the funding was nowhere near equal between the two campaigns. But you hear this argument all the time in Arizona from people on the left that if candidates just really took more progressive stances and inspired the left to come out and vote for them, then the Democrats would be more successful. And as we saw in this election, it's quite the opposite.
Does that make Donald Trump the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man?
No, something along those lines, yeah.
Wow, that's a great time for a pause. Let's break on this discussion for just a bit, and later in the show when we return, we'll talk propositions.